thank you for being here. Thank you. And we would like to honor guest, Mr. Grae Taylor. He's from One Spirit, and we're very fortunate to have him here. So let's give him a round of applause and just send him on.
I will take all of that love. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's a particular pleasure for me, and there's so much gratitude that I feel inside of myself for being able to be here and talk with you this morning. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am with One Spirit. I've been there for, I guess, 5-6 years now. But I grew up in this area. I grew up in East Tennessee, up near Carter High School. Graduated from there, yes. And I moved away. I lived in Connecticut for several years. And I slowly worked my way back down to this area. I was in Johnson City for a couple of years, attending ETSU there. Love found me in Johnson City, and so that love brought me back on down to Knoxville in 1997, and I've been here ever since. A little bit of my, I guess my spiritual background. My parents were of the Christian system, so I grew up in that, and I've since changed some of those views, and I thought I'd go ahead and share with you that I am a recovering Baptist. I haven't experienced fear or guilt in like 20 years. So, yeah. But as a part of that journey of deciding who I wanted to be as a spiritual being, two of the biggest things that I changed, and I changed them fairly early, and I'll use the word God because that's a common reference. The first is that I decided that I wasn't going to live my life in front of God, that I was going to live my life with God. That's a fundamental parameter change. When you're living with someone, there's a connection. And so what it served to do for me is to help me realize that I'm not separate from the world that I live in. With nature and people and love, that it's an immense connection. And there's so much to experience when you change how you see that connection and you live your life from that place of love instead of fear. And that was the second one, is that I decided that I wasn't going to live my life in the fear of God, that I was going to live my life in the love of God. And again, I went through a phase when I left mainstream Christianity where I even rebelled against that word, God, because of how my mind interpreted it because of the experiences I've had and with some of the people who say they speak for that God. And so it took a long time for me to get to the place where I was comfortable using that word again, redefining that word and giving it back the power that it has in my life. And so I realized that there's a great connection there. And living that life inside of that connection means that I see the God or the Spirit, the source, the life in you. And I get to enjoy that over and over and over. So I brought some notes today, so that's what my tablet is. So let me catch up. Let me find my place after I've been ranting for some time there. I am, just to think about this center, I'm really, really happy to see the growth, to see that we have so many communities in Knoxville who are kind of following this path of becoming self-aware, aligning fully with Spirit, finding places where we can become our best selves. And so I'm really, really glad that you guys are here. And again, it's just a pleasure to be here. So I talked about the changes, the two major changes. And so I did bring my bowl this morning, and I would like to just to play the bowl for a bit, just to kind of allow us to center. And there's a chorus. It's in the original Aramaic. And it's the Kadosh. And I thought while I play the bowl, we can just have that time of quiet, and I will sing the Kadosh as we move into our talk for today. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Sabayot. 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 Thank you for being here. So, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot for myself lately is that voice, which I think we all have inside, and not the intuitive voice, but that voice that sometimes becomes limiting for us. That voice that tells us that we are maybe not worthy. That voice that tells us that we are not enough. That voice that tells us that the decisions that we make in life maybe sometimes aren't good enough. Or that if we decide that that is the direction that we want to go in, that we will not be successful. I think a part of our journey becomes learning what to do with that voice. Because I know that Buddhist monks have tried for years and years to get rid of that voice. They've tried to quiet it and find a way to not hear the voice. And even the Buddhist monks have discovered that they can do that for 3-4 seconds, but the voice returns. And so I think the journey becomes knowing that the voice will be there, but what do we do with the voice? How do we see that voice in our lives? I think in the past I've seen that voice as kind of authoritarian. I've given far too much credence to that voice that I hear. I've allowed it to be more like a parent, and I've listened, and I've changed my actions based upon what that voice is telling me. But I think we have a choice. I think we can choose not to hear that voice so strongly in our lives. I think we can choose to move beyond or move around those words. One of the things that's helped me is that I've changed my perspective on that voice when I hear it. Even in getting ready for my talk this morning, when Victoria and Randy had asked me to come, there was a part of that voice that gave those messages to me. And a long time ago, I started to hear my voice, or I chose to hear my voice, as probably an 84-year-old Jewish New York lady who had smoked and drank too much in her life. And so what she said to me as I was preparing, she was like, "Grae, darling, I think it's fantastic that these people have asked you to come and to talk to them. But I don't think it's going to work out because, you're talking to people who are educated, and I just don't think that you have the depth of knowledge to tell them anything. Do y'all have that voice inside yourself that maybe she doesn't sound like that? But yeah, so what it does, allow me to apply a little bit of the comedic to that voice. It allows me to change my perspective on how I hear her. It doesn't change that I hear her. It just changes my interaction with it. It changes my perspective. And I think that perspective is such an important thing. I could hold up a picket from a fence, and I could hold it right here in front of you. It's painted white. It comes to a point on the top like all picket fences do. And I could ask you about that picket. And you may say, I see a picket. I see one picket. But if I go to this side of the room and I ask them to tell me what they see, from this perspective, you may be able to see that it's not just one picket, that it's a whole fence. So I think changing our perspective on what we see, choosing to see things in the totality of what they are, is pretty empowering. Sometimes that takes movement. If we're in a place where we see just the one piece of the fence, maybe we have to move from that place so that we can see the fullness of who we are, the fullness of what we have inside of us, the fullness of what we can become in this life. That's a part of the journey. And those are the good parts. I've read a book called The Untethered Soul. Is anyone familiar with that book? It's good. It's written by Michael A. Singer. And in that book, he says this. He says, in case you haven't noticed, you have a mental dialogue going on in your head that never stops. It keeps going and going. Have you ever wondered why it talks in there? How does it decide what to say and when to say it? And if right now you're hearing it, and if right now you are hearing, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't have voices inside my head, then that's the very voice that we are talking about. Because it continues, it's that dialogue, and it seems to talk about and to show us all the things that we experience in this life. So I think that transformation, being able to move beyond it and see it differently, to have a different experience, is what's important. Michael Singer goes on to say, there is nothing more important to growth than realizing that you are not the voice in your head. He said, if you are the one that hears it, if you are the voice, then who is it that's hearing it? And that in itself changes our perspective. I think if we can distance ourselves from that voice and not listen and not participate, not give it credence, if we can become the observer, then that's the important part. And it's interesting to me that as I started to kind of develop that perspective and to bring that more into myself and to change my views, the observer, that concept and that statement kept coming up in my life more often, in pretty rapid succession. So I think that was definitely a message that I needed at that point. Sometimes accomplishing the things that we need in this life, it's more about believing that we can do it than the actual accomplishment itself. Because I think that's where the magic happens. Mm-hmm. That's where the work is realizing that your dreams, the things that you want for yourself in this life, are capable. You are able to accomplish those. It's just getting to that point, giving yourself that permission, doing the background, doing the training that you need to get to the point to where your dreams are realized. Thinking of that makes me think back to the 4-minute mile. And years ago, the 4-minute mile was an impossibility. It wasn't that no one had done it yet. Experts had decided that the 4-minute mile was physically impossible for a human being to do. Physically impossible. And then in the 1940s, that time record for running the mile was at 4 minutes and 1 second. Close, but still not a 4-minute mile, is it? But in the Olympics on May 6th in 1954, a gentleman, let me see if I can find his name here, Roger Bannister. He was in the Olympics. He ran the mile in 3 minutes, 59 seconds. 1 second under the 4-minute mile. And that sounds fantastic. That's a really great accomplishment on his behalf. But I think the magic of that situation happens afterwards. In the following year and 2 years and 3 years. In a short span of time, after he accomplished something that was supposed to be physically impossible, 26 other people broke the 4-minute mile. I think that shows us that sometimes our limitations, our not reaching our goal, can be just a mindset. Maybe we have taught ourselves that it's not possible. Maybe we have told ourselves that I would love to get to that point, I would love for that dream to come true, but I just don't know that it will. And I think that limits us. So it's, at least for me, it's an encouragement, but it's also an opportunity that I recognize in my life to align more fully with that sense of power, that sense of energy that I think that we are all a part of. I love the fact that today's science, as an example was the Olympics, that today's science is backing up some of the spiritual experiences that we've had. I think one of those, science has now proven that when I go to shake your hand, before I touch her, in this space, there is magic that happens. They've done tests, and in the brain of the person who is shaking hands, the brain registers the physical contact before it ever happens. I love that science is backing up and validating the things that we know to be true. We are electromagnetic beings. And there's such an energy, and we have such control over that energy to share it with the people around us. And that makes the difference in our world. You know, I see so many times that as things happen in the world, we have peace rallies and we have all these big gatherings of people who are coming together to protest against a particular cause. And it makes me think of Mother Teresa. She was asked to be a part of a protest one time, and she turned it down. She says, I won't be in a protest, but if you want to have a gathering about love and peace, I'll do that. And it sounds like a similar thing, but there's a difference. There's a difference in the core of why we are taking the actions that we do. And that makes all the difference. So having that clearly defined purpose, knowing exactly what it is that you want to do, sets you on that course. It sets you onto that path of creating and doing the things that you need to make your dream happen. I think of the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers had this crazy idea that they wanted to create a machine that could fly. Can you imagine being back in that time and being the Wright brothers and telling your friends that you were going to create a machine that could fly? That's a little crazy, it sounds, doesn't it? And it was true. The Wright boys, the Wright brothers, could not fly. until. They could not fly until they could. That was a singular, solitary moment in their existence where everything that they had done, everything that they had invested in making their dream come true, came to fruition. And the Wright brothers flew. So I'd ask you to think about that in regard to your life. You know, thinking about when we were kids, we couldn't walk until we could. We couldn't talk until we could. There's so many things and so many opportunities in this life that we can experience. I think if we could fully realize the potential and the power that we are all connected to, we are boundless. And that's the journey of it. So as you go through your day, pause for a moment. When you have ideas, when you have things that you realize that you want to do for yourself, take a moment and pause with that thought. I think sometimes our thoughts are gifts. That when we have an idea, that can be a part of divine intelligence. And so spending a little time with that gift makes it solid inside of ourselves. It gives us, it starts the roots growing down into the soil of who we are. The other thing I think is true of gifts like that, of little bits of knowledge that are shared, is that if we're given the gift and we don't use it, if we don't make it a part of us, that someone else may get the gift. I can think of back years ago, I grew up on sci-fi. I'm a little geeky. Yeah. But there was a show called Outer Limits. Did you watch Outer Limits? And so there was an episode of Outer Limits, a guy sitting in a physics classroom, and he has a piece of paper, and he's doing all these numbers, he's doing little diagrams, and all of a sudden you see this look of clarity on his face, and he's like, I've got it. What he had was, he had came up with cold fusion. Cold fusion has long been kind of the sought-after creation, so because it gives us so much more energy than what is required to start the process. And so this boy thought he was given the gift of creating cold fusion, and sure enough he was, but he wasn't ready to handle that information. And so he used it in a wrong way, he created a bomb, and it was not a pleasant ending for this guy. It was cool how they ended that show though. They went back to the classroom, back into that physics class, and there was a different kid sitting in class, doodling, doing his numbers, doing diagrams. And you see on his face, he got it. He figured out cold fusion. So applying that to ourselves as we are ready to advance as spiritual beings, are we ready for that gift when we receive it? I think our transitions happen, and if we are ready for that to happen, then that's where the magic begins. It's that we have to be ready for that. Makes me also think of the songs that Michael Jackson would write. Many times he would talk about how he would go in to write one night and he would just be writing, and he would just be off somewhere else. And he said he would wake up the next morning and he would basically find this song on his desk, and he didn't necessarily remember writing that song. I think that's pretty awesome. What a great place to be more often, and as often as we can be, is being that connected to that source of inspiration, that source of creation, of becoming the spiritual being that we need to be in this life. So above all things, be honest and true to yourself. Be truly honest. It's perfectly acceptable place to be for you to say, I know that I can't create this, I know that I can't do this today, but this is my dream, and I will accomplish it. So life is filled with life. It would be fantastic if every day was rosy and sunny and we never ran out of gas or had to have car repairs. The plumbing never backed up. The kids were in perfect moods all the time. That would be fantastic. But life is life. And so that work that we do is not, it's not about the circumstance. It's not about what is actually happening in that moment. It's about what we do with that. It's about how we handle it, how we view it. I'll leave you with a little joke. One of the things that I tell my lady, my inner lady, I don't know why she's a lady, but she is. One of the things I tell her is, how nice.
Yes.
There's a little joke that surrounds how nice. You know that joke?
Yeah.
I've cleaned it up. It'll be okay. So
That's nice.
there are these three Southern ladies, and they are sitting on their veranda.
Yeah.
And one of them says, "Do you see that large car parked out there in the driveway?" She says, "My husband bought me that car for our anniversary." And one lady says, "Well, how nice." The second lady says, "Do you see this large diamond ring here on my finger?" She says, "My husband bought me that ring for our anniversary." And the same lady says, "Well, how nice." Well, they turn to her and they go, "Well, dear, what has your husband done for you?" She says, "Well, my husband sent me to finishing school. There I learned how to say, 'how nice,' instead of, 'would you hush up?'"
You cleaned that one up.
I did, yeah.
It's okay.
You still got to go, yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. So, feel free to use that. I do it in my work all the time. My boss will come in and go, "I need a report and I need that by 2 o'clock. And I'll go, "How nice." Yeah. So it's all about how we see and how we engage and how we live
Yeah.
with the things that happen to us in this life. If we treat each other well, if we begin with peace in us, if we begin with love in us, then that vibrates out into the world around us. And so we've got a job to do, don't we? Making the world a better place. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Great church today.
Thank you, darling. We're going to say this out loud. I give myself permission to love myself.
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 And so it is. Everyone stay and have a bite to eat. I call upon the men because I don't want to move those tables. That's the man job. Thank you. Let's say blessings. Let's bless this food. I bless this food with love. I raise it to the highest vibration of unconditional love. And so it is. Let's eat it.
Thank you.